It's very difficult to see exactly how our relations are going to develop. Ideally, seeing that the British public have taken the decision to leave the EU, and seeing what their criticisms were principally of our EU membership, for me, the best outcome would be broadly the one set out in the Lancaster House speech of the Prime Minister, which is that although we are outside of the EU and we enjoy the freedom to manage our affairs, which appears to a greater freedom to manage our affairs, that we are nevertheless able to maintain the closest possible links into the single market of our EU partners, in which our businesses and services can continue to provide and operate with services within that single market area. I also very much hope that we will be able to do this without there being customs tariffs, and we were able to do it at the same time. Now, I think if the Prime Minister is able to achieve this, she will be applauded for a remarkable outcome to the coming negotiations. The difficulty, as you'll appreciate, is whether in practice we can achieve it. Some of my colleagues in Parliament are not very concerned about future relations with our EU partners. They take the view that, frankly, if they don't want to do a deal with us of some description, we should just move to a World Trade Organization relationship. I personally think that that would be very damaging to the economic well-being of this country. So I want a close relationship whilst trying to respect the decision taken by the electorate. Of course, I'm an ex-Remainer, and I happen to think that we have taken a very high-risk policy decision, and that there are serious possibilities that we will find ourselves economically disadvantaged, excluded from the biggest effectively free trade area available to us of nearly 500 million people, whilst we go off to try to achieve free trade agreements around the world in other places, which may prove in practice to be very difficult to get. And I also think that in the context of Europe more generally, it's perfectly obvious that we are a collective zone of democracy and liberty, not perfect, in a sea of very considerable disturbance and danger. And I worry about the security implications of going, not because EU has a particular security angle, but the cooperation and the closeness of our cooperation with our EU partners is, to my mind, something which is very important to the quality of life and safety of British citizens.
If I may just test the relationship you described in the beginning of your answer, where you suggested it would be on the outside of the EU with the closest possible access into the single market. If I put it to you that the single market, it has four basic pillars, being the free movement of capital, services, goods and people, how do we reconcile being part of that single market and having the rights and obligations of those four freedoms whilst being outside of the EU? Practically, are they not incompatible?
You can make a very good argument that these are incompatible aims. That said, the Lancaster House speech made by the Prime Minister was not dismissed out of hand by our EU partners. And there is a national self-interest for them to maintain trading links with the United Kingdom. The question is going to be, the big question, how close can those relations be if we're not a full participating member in the single market and the customs union? Ultimately, countries can come to whatever agreements they want. The difficulty, the point's been very well made, is that the EU collectively have said, we can't give you some special status which is almost as if you were still in the EU, but with all sorts of privileges which other countries don't enjoy. So that's where the tension is going to come in these negotiations. And what I can't predict at the moment is where those negotiations are going to end up. They could end up, if the Prime Minister's vision can be delivered, in quite a good place. They could end up, I'm afraid, in a very bad place, leaving us with some extremely stark choices. And at the moment, my personal view, we are in early March 2017, I don't think anybody is in a position to make a prediction as to where we will be in 12 months' time in this negotiating process, or what the final deal will be. There are just so many imponderables about this, both about the negotiating process itself, the course of EU politics, what's going to happen in the French, German and Italian elections, the extent to which the Eurozone, which continues to be in serious crisis, how that crisis gets resolved. And so all this negotiation is being played out against a moving background. So one of the only point I keep on making in my interventions in Parliament on this is that, I suppose I make 2 points actually. One is I respect the decision of the electorate, and I don't think that Parliament should try to undermine or avoid the consequence of it. I don't think the government should either. But the second one is that I think we have to keep an open mind as to what is going to be available and what the options are as we go through this process. And the other thing is this is going to be very time consuming, very resource consuming, very energy consuming, and of course the risk to us in this country is it diverts us completely from considering 101 other things which ought to be top priorities for government. I'm afraid we have taken a decision to create a major political and constitutional crisis which is going to take 3 to 4 years, I would have thought, at minimum, to play itself out. But as I say, I'm not critical of the government. The Prime Minister has been, in a sense, given a mandate, and she's got to try to implement it, and I've got to try to do my best to help her.